We're going to pick up Hans Mattson's career after the Civil War. So remember, the Civil War ends in 1865 and Hans returns to Minnesota. A few short years later, in 1869, he's going to run for public office again. Now remember, we've seen that he's been able to get himself elected to different positions at time, but now he's running for one of the major offices in the state. He chooses to run for Secretary of State, and as a powerful person in the new Republican Party, which kind of dominates Minnesota politics, he's going to get elected. And so he's going to go to St. Paul to serve as Secretary of State, but he's not going to finish out his term because in 1871 he gets a better offer from the private sector. Now we pick up Mattson's career as an immigration recruiter. So the picture here is Jay Cook, and Jay Cook was a banker, he was a financier. If you read a lot of Civil War history, he's called the man who financed the Civil War, so he found some way to pay all the bills for the Union so that they could win that war. He's active in the railroad business, and one of his railroads is the St. Paul and Pacific Railroad. Now, these railroads were given lots of free land by the government, and they would sell this land to immigrants, and then they would use that money to expand their railroads and buy more locomotives and more rolling stock. So Jay Cook, he knows Hans Mattson, and he hires him to be an immigration recruiter. Ironically, Jay Cook, poor guy, he's going to lose all of his money in the Panic of 1873, and this is also going to hit Hans a little bit too. So Hans is going to lose some of his money in 1873 when the U.S. economy collapses one more time. Here's what Hans did as an immigration recruiter. So he spent some time in the United States, and he would write letters to Swedish newspapers in New York and Boston and Philadelphia. And these letters and these advertisements would encourage Swedes living in these big cities to come west to farm and homestead in Minnesota. Hans would also spend time in Chicago doing this. And in 1871, this is going to become another opportunity for him, and he is going to take his family and they're going to move back to Sweden. So for 5 years, from 1871 to 1876, he's living in Sweden, and he's traveling around Sweden and Norway and Finland, and he even makes one trip to Russia. And while he's over there, his job is to try to promote immigration to Minnesota. So he's talking to Swedes about packing up and leaving Sweden and coming to Minnesota. And he does a pretty good job at that. Let's go on to the last part of his public career. Here's a picture of Hans in later life. And in 1887, he's going to re-enter politics. And once again, he's going to run for the office of Secretary of State. And if I didn't say it before, the Secretary of State, they manage elections. Hans runs as a Republican, and he again wins statewide office. So he serves as Secretary of State from 1887 to 1891. And he's going to retire in 1891, probably because maybe his health was starting to fail, because he's going to die in 1893 in Minneapolis. But that cover on the left is his book that he wrote. It's his biography or autobiography called The Story of an Immigrant. And it details his rise from ordinary Swedish farm boy to Secretary of State of Minnesota, among many other things that he did in his life.